Hey friends, welcome back to my studio here at home. My name is Richard Cleveland. I am here to guide you through painting the Man of Steel, and today is no different. So we're on part 7. In the last episode, we started to layer up that skin. So we gave Superman some pores, we gave him some color. You might remember we used the FW inks and we did a spattering technique. Now what we're going to do is we're going to soften that up a little bit today, because as we look at his skin, and I'm going to go to the overhead here in just a second, but as we look at his skin, it now needs to get some of that coloring just a little bit tied in. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work around the eyes a little bit, because his eyes are still a little red, so we want to soften those up. We might get to work on the eyebrows a little bit, but we are going to use a nice sharp tip brush today. And what are we going to pull out for paints? Well, let's just start with our flesh base, which is something that we always start with, because this is really the foundation of what we're doing here. Today we are going to put in a little bit of salmon yellow, or salmon skin? Was it salmon rose is what it's called. And I know I've got some around here. There we go. We've got some salmon rose. Let's get a bottle that we've been using here for a while. There's one right there. We're going to shake up the salmon rose. We're going to be using that today. And what we're going to do is we're just going to blend that skin a little bit more. And I think we're going to use some light flesh as well. Now, you can see these two colors. One is a darker pink, one is yellow or a lighter pink. We might add a little bit of sunny skin tone to that, which will just give it just a little bit of a yellow hue, which is something that we want. These two very light pinks are going to help out as well. So let's dive deep into what we're doing. Again, let's get ourselves a brand new professional makeup wedge, because we're going to be using that again today. Because we got such a large surface here, I really want to, it's easier to do with this than using my finger. We're going to work and define those lips a little bit more today as well. So we are going to dive into some reds. We're probably going to use a darker red. And let's go to the overhead and we will look at that. Okay, so here we are. We've got our Superman. And now we're going to mix some colors. So you can see we've got our palette here, and we're just going to continue to use that one area right there. I should probably clean those out pretty soon. So let's start with our base flesh. I'm going to get a generous amount in there. And I think I'm going to start with the salmon rose. This is Vallejo color 70835 salmon rose. We'll just give that a little shake. And we will put some of that in there. About a third of the size of what we put in for our base. I'm also going to add a little bit of this lighter flesh as well. So we're just going to mix that up. Add a little bit of this light flesh. And again, I'm just trying to mix these up. We'll get our stir stick right here. We'll get our stir stick and we'll mix up those colors. Now you're saying to yourself, wow, Rich, you sure mixed up a lot of paint there. And yeah, I did. I did indeed. But I'm going to do something with some of this paint as well. I just want to get this mixed up to start off with. And you can see here, this is the colors that we've sort of been using, and this is a little bit more pink. You can see that there on the brush or on the palette. Let's get all that color mixed up. So we've got it in there. And there, it looks like we've pretty much got it now. I think we've scraped the bottom and the sides pretty good. And again, that's going to dry a little bit darker. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some of this paint and I'm going to put it back in this other side, and I'll explain why I'm doing that. Let me just grab a pipette here. I'm just going to use the pipette, and I'm going to grab some of that paint, and I'm going to move it over here. Just grab a little bit more. There we go. And now I'll just dump that in there. And now I'm going to add a little bit of the sunny skin tone. This is Vallejo color 70845. I'm only going to add like just a very, very little, and we're going to use this first. So I'm going to add maybe 2, maybe 3 drops, and we'll see where we're at with that. And maybe a little bit more yellow. Nope, that's almost, you can see how it's changed the color between the two. All right, so that's actually really good. So it's a little bit of drops is what we want, and we're going to start using today our number 1 brush, this brush right here. You guys can see that on the screen. We're going to use this one. We're going to pull a little bit of this paint. Let's just clean out that pipette if we can, a little bit. And we'll just leave that in the water for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my water mixture, because I want to really thin this down. So I'm going to put some here, and I'm going to put some here. And I will probably scoop up some paint with this bigger brush. We'll just scoop up some of that paint, and we'll bring it up to the top of the palette. And then we'll get a nice thin wash going there. And again, if it's too thick, you can see how it's really thinning that out. And that's going to be super thin on our project here. But we're going to build up this color. I'm just going to rinse this a little bit, get a little bit of that other color off, and we're going to do the same thing over here. We're just going to pull up some of that paint, and then we're going to mix it in. So you can see we've got 2 distinct colors here. One's a little bit more yellow, one's a little bit more pink. And we'll just toss that brush in there for now. And we're going to start off with the yellow first, and we're going to do a really, really thin wash. So we're going to get deep into that color. You can see that there's not a lot of color that's coming out on there. And now we're just going to start putting in a really, really thin wash of this all over. I could probably use a much bigger brush. And you can hardly see it going on, but that's okay. That's okay. So we're just going to cover this whole thing over. I could probably have used a bigger brush here, and this is going to help to blend in some of that color we've been talking about. I'm going to use a bigger brush. This one's too small. Let's use this one here. This is our number 5 brush. Oh, wrong color. Let's get that color off there. And we'll go back to this yellow color. That's the color we're looking for, is that yellow color. And we're just going to give it a nice wash, and that's what we're looking for. And yeah, it looks like, oh, Rich, you're making a mess and you're covering up all of that work that you did, but watch what happens here in just a second. Watch what's going to happen. We're going to take our sponge, and we're going to start doing what we've been doing all along. And we're just going to start dabbing that. And if you've been following along, you'll notice that a lot of what we've done on this figure already has been just softening that skin tone. And that's really what we're doing here again today, is we're just softening that skin tone. And we're blending in all of those colors that we put on. And we'll get underneath the eye here, and around the mouth, and along here. And we're going to get our sponge and get right back in there again and just start dabbing. This is also helping us to get that skin texture we've been looking for. I know it looks like I'm just putting it on and taking it off, but you can definitely see that there's a difference between this side and this side of Superman now. This side is starting to look a little bit more blended with this color that we're putting on, this wash. And we're going to get up in here and get around. Now again, I don't do this on every figure or every face that I do. This is, again, remember we talked about taking liberties with our figures because we can. This is one of those areas where you can do that. And again, let's just grab that sponge and get right in there. And we're just going to work all that color down. And get out some of the deeper stuff. And you can see how it's really starting now to change his overall look. Might want to do a little bit more down that nose. And we'll take that sponge and we'll just kind of dab it in there around the mouth here a little bit. Around the chin. My wife said to me the other night after I showed her what we had done, she says, man, that just looks like he's got a dirty face now. And the more I looked at it, the more I was starting to think, she might be right. So then I went back and I thought, well, let's just go back and just start to tidy up some of those areas. And now I'm going to move back to this one because I want to do some smaller areas like in here. Then I'll come back with that sponge and I'll just blot it off. Get up in that hair. I see a little bit too much sitting up in there. And again, don't forget that neck. We've got that neck to do too. So we're just going to bring this all in here and we're going to get that neck area. We'll get in around the ear too as well. We'll just kind of fill that in a little bit. And we'll come back with our sponge and just start to work that color. And again, it's all about blending. Now, yes, it's not totally dry, but we're not really going for a dry brush here. We're going for just adding subtle color. And because we've got so much color on our sponge, we can use some of that and start spread it around like on the ears a little bit and up and behind the neck and behind the ears. And you see we got a lot of moisture up in there. Take that off. Take all of that off because we're going to be doing something with that a little bit later. Let's go around this side. We'll kind of hit these areas over here. And again, we're just filling that color in. And I know you're probably saying, wow, that's a lot of on and off. But if you really want to get that realistic skin texture, it really pays to take your time and build up your layers slowly. And at first they may not look like it, but after a couple of days, you may go back and look at your model and say, wow, that does look a lot different now. I'm just going to grab some of that around the ear here. Behind the ear. Now this is really watery, so it's really running everywhere. And I'm trying to keep it out of certain areas. There we go. So that is now starting to look a lot better. And we can see the highlights in the cheeks. See the highlights around the mouth, down on that jawline, in and around those ears. Same thing over here. We're just going to work that color. And now we're just working the dampness of our sponge, really. So we're just working the dampness of our sponge. And just getting into areas that I think we need to lighten up a little bit. There we go. Those eyes are starting to look a little bit better now. Even with that one wash that we did, you can see that a lot of this has already changed. I want to get in around this eye a little bit more. So I'm just going to bring some of this color in. And then I'm just going to come back and just blot it off. Blot off those areas. Because all I'm trying to do is just soften that darkness around his eyes. And I'll do this side as well. Get up a little bit here underneath the eye. Again, the area that's going to be exposed. Like right there. And then we'll just come back and we'll just lightly blot that off. And it really does start to change the look of our Man of Steel as we do that. And just start building these up slowly but surely. Like this line right here, I want to keep that little bit of redness in there, but I don't want it to be so prominent as it has been in earlier photographs that I've taken. So we can see that that is starting to change now. And it might take a little bit more. Now, as we discussed, this Superman is a little bit older. So, you know, it's he's going to have some chiseled eye features. And if we get to a point where we just want to take some of that color that we've got down there, we can actually grab a little bit of it, and we're just going to dab it into areas, and then come back with our sponge and just blend that in. Just like we did there. And you can see now that starts to go away a little bit. It softens that up just ever so slightly. And we're not using a lot of paint here. We're just using a little bit. And we're just using that to soften up that color just ever so slightly. Because now we're using the mixed paint. And we're not using the thinner paint. Okay, so let's go back to doing our washes again. Well, actually, let's continue on because we got a few areas over here we want to kind of touch up a little bit. So we're just putting in little bits of color and getting in our sponge, and we're taking, you know, we're kind of blending that in. Because our sponge is a little bit wet, it actually isn't bad. It gives us the opportunity to really blend that in. Now his eyes are not so dark, as we can see, and it looks like we got a little bit of a booger on there, which I don't like, but and that pretty much, I'm actually pretty happy with that. The ears are looking pretty good. This ear's a little light. Maybe we can get in there and do a little bit more of a wash on this ear. We'll just grab some of this and we'll just do a little bit more of a wash on this ear. Just looking a little bit too pink. So I don't know how well you guys can see what I'm doing here, but I know it looks really blown out on camera, but trust me, it's not. And if there's areas you can't get at with your sponge, that's okay. A little bit around the back of the neck we're going to do here. Grab that bigger brush again, and we're just going to get in around the back of that neck. And come back and blend all that back in. And there we go. So I'm pretty happy with the way that's come out so far. I'm actually extremely happy with the way that's come out. And I'm just going to use this sponge just to dab in areas where I think need to be highlighted a little bit more. So all I'm doing here is I'm just using the sponge to highlight some of those areas that I think need to be highlighted. And I'm just using the natural dampness of the sponge from the stuff that we've done. All right, okay. So I'm gonna grab another clean sponge because we're gonna switch to a lighter color now. And we're just gonna give that another little stir. So we've got the color where we want it. And now I'm not going to be so, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to be so, I'm not going to do so much coverage. I'm actually going to just do light coverages in spotted areas now. Like around here, around that cheek. I want to really kind of bring in those areas that I think really should start to be highlighted. And now again, we're just going to come back and I'm going to use the wide part of the makeup sponge. And now that's really starting to show what I wanted it to show. And now we're going to come down here around this area on the mouth. And again, just going to dab that off. I'm being very selective now where I'm going with this color. Even though it's a super thin wash, I'm going very, very, very lightly to where I want it. I know it looks like there's a lot of color pigment there, but there really isn't. It's mostly water. And again, coming back with that makeup sponge and just blending that in. Down in here a little bit. Top of the chin. Underneath that lip. And again, I'm just getting very, very kind of squiggly here. I'm not even really paying much attention. And now I'm just coming back and blending that. Again, all over the chin. So his chin doesn't turn out to be so red. And I dropped my brush. Let's see if we can get the booger off that. That was on the floor. There we go. Somebody asked me today when they saw pictures of this if this was 3D printed or sculpted. Well, the answer to both of those questions is yes. It was both 3D printed and sculpted. Now I'm just grabbing a little bit of my paint and I'm just going to dab it in certain areas. And again, I'm just going to come back and I'm going to soften and blend that into the skin. There we go. There we go. Let's take a little bit of this and put it on the highlights up here in the forehead, because those are areas I want to tackle. Maybe right there on the very bridge of the nose. And now I'm using that more pinkish color and I'm just highlighting some smaller areas and then coming back again with that wide portion of my makeup sponge and blending it out, blending it up and into that part of the forehead. And remember, if it looks a little too thick, you can always go back and just grab a little bit of water and just kind of take that water and use it to erase your mistakes to some degree. If you take clean water, you can really go in there and fix any mistakes that you've got along the way. Again, we're just using the wide portion of that brush. Now, there's a little too much red here for me, so I just want to tap in a little bits of color. Again, I'm just going to blend that with the large portion of the brush or the large portion of the makeup sponge. And it really starts to bring to life what we were after. So I'm really happy with the way that has come out now. I know I mixed way too much paint, but I always tend to do that. It's really weird. So let's now move on to doing some of the lips. And what we're going to do with the lips is we're going to take some of this pinkish color that we have, and we're going to just push that into an area. And now we are going to grab ourselves a little bit of, not vermilion, I think we're going to add some flat red to that. Just a very, very little bit of flat red. And I'll put that off over here. So I've got a little bit there. I have to get another flat red here pretty soon. And I'll just take a little bit of that red and I'll mix it in. You see how red that is now becoming? And that's the reason I mixed that flesh tone in with that. Because now you're going to see what we're going to do in the eyes. We're going to start to work those eyes a little bit. Clean off our brush. Just get a little bit of clean water here. And put that in over here. I'm just going to thin this down a little bit. And what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to get right around the eyes here. Just get those eyelids. I'm not too concerned if I get the whole eye. If I do, I can always just come back and just dab it off. But I want to get right around the eye here, because what we're going to come back and do later is that could actually be a little bit redder. So I'm going to just grab a little bit more red. That's more blood vessel-y, I think, but what we want. And we're just going to come right in around the eye here. I'm just going to line the eye. I know that looks really pink right now, but it won't for long. I'm trying to get down in the corners as well. Get down in those corners. Just roll your brush out so you get a nice point on the brush. Get right in the corner there, and then just line the bottom of that eye. You want to get the eyelid. There we go. And then we're going to come back and do the top as well. Roll that brush out. You can see as I'm turning the brush, I can get a nice thin line out of that. And we'll do the same thing on the underside of the lid here. Now I know that looks kind of pink right now, but don't worry too much about that because we are going to fix that. Just want to make sure that I get that pink right around that eye. And remember our warm oyster white that we've used in the past? We're going to use that again. So first we're going to just dry these eyes. Dry your eyes. Okay, that's how I speed things up. And we're going to grab our warm oyster white. Now you could use a very light, very light flesh here. I think that looks a little too yellow. So I make up my own warm oyster white, which has a little yellow in it, has a little gray in it. And then I will take I usually like to use a very fine brush here. And in this case, it's a 0. And I'm just going to run it through my tongue there to kind of get a little bit of color on, or a little bit more of a point on it. And now I'm going to come back and I'm going to work that eye so that my color, and this is a great time to grab your goggles, and I tend to use these quite often. I'll put these on and get a look at what I'm doing. I need to open this up a little bit. There we go. I don't need the monocle down, but this allows me to get in and I can see exactly where I'm going with this color. And then we're not trying to undo everything that we did, but we are trying to just soften up his eyes a little bit. And you may have to turn the model around a little, which is fine. What we're trying not to do, though, is cover up that lower lid line that we just painted on. All we're doing now is we're just covering up the excess. And this is a big model, so I have to hold it in different ways that I'd normally do, so that it doesn't cover up all of my hard work. And we're just going to fill that in just a little bit. There we go. And we are going to put a lash line on here at some point as well, so we're just trying to sharpen up that line as best we can. And we're just going to sneak up on it. There we go. And I'm using a brush that I have a good point on, and I'm just taking my time. Just taking my time. And that's what I want you guys to do too, is I just want you to take your time. And that's going to make all the difference in your painting when it comes to the end. And there we go. We'll just sharpen this up just a little bit. Just sharpen it right there. There we go. And again, if you think that that's a little too much, go back to your pink and grab a little bit of your pink and just dot it in there. And that will help. To really make that look like an eyeball. So we've got a little bit of red around his eyes. I'm trying to keep my brush at a point. I just goobered underneath his eye. So I'm going to grab myself a little bit of water here and just get that. Oh, look at that. Let's get a clean end. Now what I'll do sometimes with these is I will dip them in the water and then I'll just bring them to the point. You guys saw me do this an episode or so ago, and that'll help me to erase any mistakes that I may have. And that's what I've just done there. So, do I like the way that eye's coming out? I certainly do. A good friend of mine said it looks like Superman has cataracts. And you might be right. It does look like he has cataracts. I'm just using the paint out of the lid here. Primarily because I don't really need a lot of paint. So no point in putting it into my palette when I can just grab it out of the lid as I need it. And again, we're just going to sneak up on those lines and not cover over the bottom lash line. This is the most tedious part of doing something like this, is trying to make sure that you don't get paint where you don't want it. But again, if you do, it's a pretty easy fix at the end of the day. But it does take a little bit of time to get it right. And you might not get it right the first time. You might not get it right the second time. But with practice, you are going to get it right. The more we practice, the better we get. There's just a little bit I want to kind of cover up here. So I'm just going to sneak up on it. So there we go. So now those are pretty much where I want them to be. In terms of being able to put color on them. Probably bring this one down a little bit more. There we go. Now, I will hit that with the hairdryer again. And I'm going to grab some gray. And I'm going to grab a medium gray. I'm not going to grab a dark gray. I'm just going to grab a medium gray. And the reason I'm going to grab medium gray is because hopefully this has got some medium gray in it. just enough. So I'm just going to start to outline the pupils here. And again, I'm using that really fine tip brush, that 0. I'm going to bring down my goggles here, and I'm going to look for the edge, and I'm just going to dot my paint in there till I'm happy and I know where the edge is, and then I'll come back and fill it in. I don't want his eyes to be too big, but I also don't want them to be too small. So I'm looking for the edge on this one because these eyes had an edge to them. So all I'm doing now is I'm just trying to find that edge, and then I'll come back and I will fill it in. And I'll get right in there. And this is just going to be the first of our eyes. Just the first layer. And some people are probably saying, Rich, well, why aren't you using black to outline that? Because our eyes aren't black on the outside, that's why. And we know that Superman has blue eyes. So we are going to use that to our advantage. And the gray really, really helps there. Again, very light touch, take your time. And if it doesn't look like it's round enough, you can always come in and just put those dots in till you feel that it's round enough. There we go. That doesn't look too bad at all. See if you guys can see that there. It might be a little bright. If I hold it down, you guys will be able to see it better. So now we'll do the other eye. Hopefully we're not going to make them cross-eyed. So I'll start by putting a dot in the middle, and then I'll bring down my glasses here, and I will start to define that outer rim of his eye. And I know I'm not saying much because I have a hard time talking and concentrating. Although if you ask my wife, she would not agree with that. She says I never shut up. And I'm kind of happy with the way those are starting to look. And we're going down a little bit past that bottom lid. And now that we've got the eyes defined, we're not going to do too much more with those eyes. We're going to leave those eyes probably right where they are at the moment. I'm really happy with that. But now I want to get back to those lips. Remember that pink that we used? And I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place today. But we're going to get that pink moving again just a little bit. We're going to get our brush to a nice point. And what we're going to start to do is we're going to start to put lines, just very small lines on the lips, which we're going to come back and define later on. These are lines that we all have. If you look at your lips, you just want very, very fine lines here. You don't want a lot. Because we're not trying to give Soups a makeup look. We're just trying to give him a very subtle, just trying to build up that color just like we did everywhere else. We're just trying to build up the color in his lips. And we're just going to put in a few lines here. And I'll show you how we're going to take care of that. This is also defining the sculpture of these lips as well. We got a little booger hanging out right here in the corner. There we go. Now we got it out. Again, we're just defining these lips. The Soups doesn't need to have, you know, big lips, but he does need to have some definition to these lips. And there's a definite line here that we are going to have a look at. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, well, Rich, that looks really, really red and pink. But we're going to take this color and we're going to mix it in a little bit more, a little bit more. And you can see where we're going here now. We've made that just a very, very light pink. And we're going to grab some water. We're going to add some water to this. And we're going to wash over those lips. There we go. Nice and thin. That's what I'm looking for right there. That color. Now I'm going to wash over these lips. I want to make sure that I get way down here in the corner. And watch what happens here. Take our wedge and we're just going to go in and pat away some of that. Again, because we've made it really thin, it may look thick right now, but it really isn't. Again, we're going to take our wedge and we're just going to work it all the way across there. There we go. And we will crease his mouth with a darker color later on. Just to give those lips some separation. Now we'll do the bottoms. What I'm trying to do is follow that line that we defined earlier. And now we're going to take that makeup sponge and we're just going to come in and blot off a lot of that. And it really softens down his lips. And again, we're just going to go in and just soften those down. That looks much better. I'm going to take some pictures of this pretty soon and show you guys what we mean. Now, what I can do now is, because this is where it's at, I can actually take some of this really thin wash that we have. If I think these are a little too pink, and I think that they might be, I'm just going to wash over these lips one more time, and that will soften them down, hitting all those areas. I'll come back and I will use that portion, and that softens them down just a little bit. So it doesn't look like he's wearing lipstick. And if you need to do it again, do it again. And that really goes to sell the illusion of his lips. And now you can see that there's a little bit of cracking in there, and we softened the color on them so they don't look so horrible. And I think this is coming along really, really good. I'm really happy with the way this is looking now. But before we move on, I do want to, I'm going to grab some burnt umber here. I've got this both in Model Master, and I believe I have some in, that's leather brown, mahogany brown. We have a black red. There's a hull red. That's a little too. There's flat brown. I think I'm going to take some of this dark red here. You see that color there? I think I'm going to use that to really define the separation in his lips. So I'm just going to put a little bit over here, and I'm going to grab some water, and because all I really want it to do is get right down in there. I just want it to get across that crease. And I want it really, really thin when I do. So all I'm going to do is just load my brush with some of that water and just hit the lip. And that's going to help to define those lips. Now this is very, very thin. You can see there it's very thin, but that's okay. That's okay. We don't need it to be really, really dark here. If you get too much building up in the corner, just go ahead and blot it off. And if you want to make it a little bit more, and make it not run so much, just add a little bit more paint. I'm just going to pop these. Nope. Pop these down so I can see. That's what I'm looking for right there. Because this is so thin, I can just blot it up. There we go. Almost has a bit of a glossy look to it, doesn't it? And then I'm just going to come back and just get the excess. Again, just get the excess out of those corners. And there we go. I'm really starting to dig that now. There we go. Now he's starting to look like the Man of Steel again. And again, you know, if you get that little bit of color where you don't want it, just grab your sponge, put a little bit of water in there, and just get rid of that. Because remember, we sprayed this between our coats the last time. I was going to get into eyebrows and eyelashes today, but I think we're going to save that for the next one. We've done quite a bit on him today. We softened up that skin. We'll take some pictures. We'll put them up on Facebook, and we'll go from there. All right. So there you have it. What did we do tonight? Well, we softened up that skin a little bit, covered up a little bit of that texture, but because we used our sponge, we kept that pore texture that we were looking for. We did a couple of different washes. Again, we spot washed, and it's all about building up that color. The more you build it up, the better and more realistic he starts to look. And you can see, I guess, let's see if we can turn this one down. There we go. Now you can see kind of what he's starting to look like. And he's getting better. His lips are a little bit pink, but we're going to take care of that. We're going to soften those down a little bit more, probably in the next one. I'm really liking where his skin is at now. So now we're going to do more work on the eyes in the next one. We're going to start layering in those lashes. We're going to fix the eyebrows. We'll start to really work on the hair. And then we're just about done with the head of the Man of Steel. Then we'll go ahead and start doing the rest of this. If you are interested in getting one of these models, you can go to U3D Print Shop. It is a free model for download from their repository. I don't believe they put these up on Thingiverse, but you can go and check. But for now, I think this we're in a good spot here with the Man of Steel. And I'll take some pictures here and we'll put them up as well so you guys get a chance to see that. So until next time, my friends, this was part 7, and part 8 will be the next one. We're getting pretty close to about 8 hours into just painting skin and skin texture. We probably got about another 3 or 4 hours to go before I'm really happy with it. And then we'll take it from there. So until next time, my friends, please remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. And thank you to all my Patreons for keeping this project alive and helping me out with your support each and every month for those of you that want to learn more about painting. See you next time.